Alright then. So here I go again. Uh, Continuing this playlist, which I've entitled Total Unload. Um, so in this particular video, I'm going to say what I've been up to these days. So I've been known, as a homeless advocate, and I noticed that this light is shining a bit brighter now than it has with the previous videos that I've shot. Just can't help but notice that. Um, anyway, um, so I've advocated for DC's homeless since mid-June 2006. That's what I'm best known for. But for the last few years, actually, that advocacy has slowed down. So we all know about COVID-19, the COVID-19 measures which went into effect in the United States in March of 2020. And that, of course, stopped a lot of face-to-face meetings. Uh, my advocacy did consist largely of going into face-to-face meetings with DC government, uh, and so when the face-to-face meetings were stopped because of COVID-19 measures, then of course I wasn't going into these meetings. And um, sure, I know how to use technology. I'm using technology right now, and I could do WebEx, I could do Zoom, but that kind of goes to the next thing, which is I've had several different jobs while living here in DC, where I moved in the summer of 2005, arriving on the night of July 31st, 2005. Um, and my current job, I've actually been at since the middle of July 2018. And of the several jobs I've had in DC, it is the only one that has been Monday through Friday, uh, regular business hours. Well, I start a little sooner than regular business hours. Until very recently, I was starting at 6 a.m. For the past couple of months, it's been 7 a.m. But yeah, so my work hours oftentimes go over into the meeting times for DC government, and I do event rentals, and when there are a lot of events during warm weather, I might end up working 10, 12, 16 hours or more. I've done as many as 20 hours straight on this job. But anyway, that has prevented me from being at meetings, whether they're in face or via Zoom/WebEx. Uh, and like I said, it is the first of my several jobs in DC that was day shift, Monday through Friday. Other jobs have been weekends, evenings, and so my job keeping me from going to meetings. Um, I will also say that I've had some legal issues uh, concerning my advocacy and dealing with DC government. Let me point out, though, that when I started advocating for DC's homeless in mid-June 2006, um, the mayor at that time was a man named Anthony Williams, Tony Williams. And he left office on January 2nd, 2007, about 6.5 months after I started advocating. Uh, and so I didn't deal with his administration all that much, but we didn't have any drama. I went through the entire administration of a man named Adrian Fenty from January 07 to January 2011. No drama. I mean, we knocked heads a little bit, but it didn't lead to legal issues or anything of that nature. Um, I went through the entire administration of a man named uh, Vince Gray from January 2011 to January 2015. Uh, no drama. Again, we knocked heads a little bit, but it didn't lead to any legal issues or the such, or or uh, or the like, I should say. Let me get my English right. But and so then a woman named Muriel Bowser became mayor on January 2nd of 2015. She's now in her second four-year term. She's up for re-election in 2022, and if she loses, she'll leave office on January 2nd, 2023. And so a little more than 2.5 years into her term is when the legal issues arose. And well, let me see. I had a thought. I was, and and well, oh, I know what I was going to say was that male mayors tend to have a lot of male cabinet members. Female mayors tend to have a lot of female cabinet members. Okay, and so with these male mayors, the last little bit of Tony Williams, all of Fenty, and all of Gray, uh, yeah, I dealt with a lot of male administrators, male cabinet members, and we talked like men, even if we didn't see eye to eye. You know, even if the conversation was tense. You know, even if there was a little bit of sharp language, but we got through it. You know, and so then yeah, I speak to women the same way. I do treat women like equals. Uh, for me, anyway, treating a woman like an equal means that I don't nurture her. I don't assume that she's weaker than a man mentally. I mean, physically, you can't really get around that. And when it comes to physical issues, well, there are men who are small. I mean, I'm not a big guy. Uh, there are men who are small. There are men who are disabled. You know, men don't deal with pregnancy and the physical issues that accompany it. You know, but and men get old and frail, and men get sick and so forth. So you know, so catering to a woman's physical issues is not that far different from catering to a man's. You know, when necessary. But mentally speaking, you know, you can't just look at the size of a person's mind and say this person has a strong mind, that person has a weak mind, this person has a sane mind, that person has an insane mind, a healthy mind, an unhealthy mind. You know, you just kind of have to get to know the person a bit and then govern yourself accordingly. But that said, because the mental strengths or weaknesses are not quite as apparent, not quite as obvious as the physical ones, that gives me a lot of latitude to say, you know, I just don't choose to nurture a woman who's not my girlfriend and not my wife. Now, to a degree, I will be somewhat nurturing to the girlfriend or the wife. But if you're not my girlfriend and you're not my wife, then you're not my emotional responsibility. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to treat you like one of the guys. And that doesn't mean I'm going to do that locker room banter, as Donald Trump might call it. But it does mean that when it comes to reasoning, I'm going to expect that I can reason with you just like I can reason with a man. And I'm also going to expect that, you know, if we do get upset with each other, then we're going to disagree in the same way that I would disagree with another man. And for the most part, when I disagree with another man, it remains civil, it remains respectful, and we just reason things out. Well, I should put a little asterisk there that, I do tend to limit what types of men I deal with. I do realize that a lot of men in our society today have been emotionalized and don't think rationally, and I do tend to avoid those types of men. But when I'm dealing with a man who I realize does still have a good sense of rationale, then yeah, it remains calm and respectful for the most part. But yeah, we all have our days and we all have our issues that we're really passionate about, really serious about, however you want to put it. And so we will sometimes come to loggerheads. But when, well, if you can understand that that would happen between two men, you should be able to understand that it would happen also between two women sometimes, and that it might happen between a man and a woman. And if I do actually shout at a woman or curse a woman out the same way that I might shout at a man or curse him out if he really gets on my last nerve and we really get that heated, okay, it's not misogyny, it's not chauvinism, it's not any of that stuff. It's just me treating you the same way that I would treat a man in the same set of circumstances. Again, it is just me treating the woman the way I would treat a man in the same set of circumstances. AOC got into a heated argument on the steps inside of the U.S. Capitol one day. Her and a male senator, and he called her out of her name, said some nasty things to her, and she wanted to call it, misogyny and so forth. And hey, if that guy, whatever his name was, if he has argued with at least one man in the same way, then you can't really call it misogyny because he's just doing to her or did to her what he's done to other men. It may not be nice, but it doesn't rise to the level of misogyny. If he's just arguing with her the same way that he's argued with men. So anyway, but yeah, I did have some legal issues that ran from October of 2017 to January of 2019. Those legal issues between myself and DC government ended completely in January 2019, and me not being in meetings since then has nothing at all to do with the legal issues, but I just do want to make that clear because people get stories screwed up, and sometimes they deliberately half tell a story, sometimes they deliberately exaggerate, sometimes they deliberately tell a full-on lie. And so that was a 15-month period, 1.25 years, that those legal issues were hanging over my head. And it's been almost 3 years, about 2 years and 2 years and 10 months now. Because we're now in November 2nd. 2 years and 10 months since those legal issues even existed. So, let me see. Well, so now to go over to my faith, because it has a lot to do with what I'm up to right now. So, I've always been a believer. I hesitate to use the word Christian because of some of the crazy behaviors that I see out there, especially with the evangelicals falling in lockstep behind Donald Trump. But that's not it. I mean, even before Trump was a candidate, I knew that a lot of churchgoers were really crazy and caught up in their emotions, and deliberately, because of those emotions, ignoring uncomfortable scriptures, uh, and they just have a lot of irrational things that they say concerning God, concerning the Bible. Now, some of you watching this might not even believe in God. Okay, I get that. I know there are plenty of atheists in the world, and there are some agnostics as well. And you might argue that I don't make sense for even believing in God, but hey, I am a firm believer in God, and that's not going to change, and I have plenty of reason to believe that there is a God. But, then there's that, well, if that's what you believe type of thinking. If that's what you believe, why don't you do this? If that's what you believe, why don't you do that? That sort of thinking where you just kind of get into what the other person says they believe, and you say, okay, well, if I believed such and such, I would do this. If I believed such and such, I would say that. And within that framework, just there are some churchgoers whose ways don't make sense when you think in terms of them being quote unquote believers or supposed Christians. Uh, and it's like, well, for instance, one example is that I remember coming out of a late evening Bible study, and as everybody was walking out of the building, it actually was not at a church, but as we were walking out of the building after the Bible study, people are saying they have to rush to get home, get ready for work the next morning, take care of some late evening obligations before going in, and so forth. And so, with this little bit of time that I had to have some small talk after the Bible study, I said to the guy who led the Bible study, I said, you know, in Isaiah 45:7, God himself says, I form light and create darkness, I make good and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. God himself said that he does evil. This man looked at me and said, God is all good, no evil. And like I say, we didn't have time to finish that conversation. It was just kind of a small side conversation as we headed out of the Bible study, and everyone got ready to go home and go to bed. And so it just kind of stood out to me that right after I quote a scripture word for word from the book that he supposedly lives by, that he would turn to me and directly contradict what that book says. And he didn't make any sort of argument for why he thought that it made sense for him to directly contradict what the Bible says, even though the Bible is what he supposedly lives by. And so that didn't make any sense to me. And I've also had churchgoers or professing Christians to get angry at me, not just disagree with me, not just directly contradict what the Bible verse says, but actually get angry at me for quoting a verse that just made them uncomfortable. Okay, so there are some things that people do as so-called believers, so-called Christians, churchgoers. There are things that they do that doesn't make sense even in its own right. So I'm kind of tired of irrational, emotional churchgoers that don't want to look at the grim realities set forth in the Bible, and whose ways don't even make sense in their own right. But on a broader scale, I'm sick of our emotionalized society where so many people just they can't even think their way out of a wet paper bag, to borrow from an old expression. But it's like, so that being the case, I have really begun to do a lot of withdrawing. I've ignored a lot of phone calls and just decided not to even engage with a lot of people, and I've just been spending a lot of more time to myself, staying to myself, and there's that part of me that just kind of wants irrational, emotional people to just fuck off. I mean, I really just don't have any time for it. I only want to deal with people that want a reason, that want to make sense. I'm at 20 minutes and 23 seconds now, so I don't know when this thing is going to cut me off. It's changed recently. So there's a part of me that's just kind of waiting until 2022 and through 2022. I mean, nobody's promised tomorrow. And so I don't know, when I'll breathe my last. But as I said in a previous video, one or two videos back, I think it's two. Let me see. No, it's just one video back. It should be. I did it yesterday, but so one video back, you should be able to see where I say a lot about how I think that things are going to fall apart in 2022. That 2020 was the death of U.S. geopolitical influence, and I'm not going to rehash that. And how that 2022 is going to be the year that we see the death of the U.S. government's domestic influence, a lot of conflict between the federal government on the one hand and the states and territories on the other hand. Okay, you can go back and look at that if you'd like. But I think that a lot of stuff about our society is going to fall apart in 2022. You got the ships off the coast of California. We've got a shortage of microchips, semiconductors, whatever you want to call them. And that affects all technology. And I think all this stuff is really going to hit the fan in 2022. And DC might actually get statehood in 2022. You can go back and see what I said about that too. Well, actually, in short, it's just that the federal government is gonna have so many problems that they're gonna eliminate the problem of overseeing DC. They're just gonna say, hey, you can have statehood, so that we don't even have to deal with you, and at least not in that way. Yeah, and you just have more latitude to take care of yourselves, DC, without as much federal oversight as you now have. But anyway, but I'm just kind of waiting for things to fall apart. And then of course there's the housing issue and how that many people could lose their housing as the assistance for COVID-19 is drawn down. Okay, so I think there's going to be a lot of major problems in 2022, and people are really going to become aware of the fact that society is imploding, that the nation that has been a world power for several decades now, since the end of World War II, that very nation, that very empire is imploding. Okay, and that just changes the global dynamic. But so next thing that I have written down here is just basically that I'll be energized to have rational, unemotional conversation. And so after enough things fall apart, then people might be more willing to discuss grim realities. People might be more willing to have what they have up until now considered to be hard conversations. And they won't feel like I'm forcing them into an uncomfortable conversation. They'll realize that the